Shooter ready. Stand by. Saddle up for gunfighter life. Veteran owned. Warfighter approved. Gluten free. Sustainably harvested. Renewable. All the buzzwords, right? No, but to be serious, welcome to Gunfighter Life, the podcast where we talk about guns, gunfighting, tactics, the right way, with Almighty God at the center, Judeo-Christian values, and real-world first-hand experience. So as you might know, especially if you're a patron, but if you're in the regular listenership, you might know that several of our guns got stolen by ours. I mean, my wife's and I's. But no worries, everything we have belongs to God and God provides. But on a quest to replace both my wife's carry gun and not my main carry gun, if you listen, you know that I generally carry a full-size fighting handgun, which I advocate. But not always. The vast majority of the time, I try to carry a full-size fighting handgun. However, sometimes I don't. Sometimes I carry my super small carry gun, which is a .357 Magnum Smith & Wesson J-frame 360 PD. But I had an in-between, and I had it for years and years. Tried to replace it several times, but I kept going back to the Glock 26. It is a phenomenal, let's say, subcompact carry gun for kind of those in-between situations. It was a great balance to try to replace it with the Glock 43. I bought that Glock 43 when it was really, really new and it came out. And I quickly realized this thing is not better than my 26 for me. You might think so, but I didn't think so. I didn't shoot as good. Anywhere that I could pretty much carry that I did normally carry, I could carry the Glock 26. The Glock 26 took regular full-size Glock magazines. It was still fit in my pocket. Could carry it inside the waistband, outside the waistband. So I went back to the Glock 26, and over the years I tried to replace it with an FN 509 compact. Maybe a compact tactical. Anyway, that thing to me was hot garbage. A waste of money. Quickly got rid of that thing as well. And I continue to carry the Glock 26. Who knows how many years and years that was one of my carry guns. Again, I advocate normally carrying a full-size fighting handgun. But the Glock 26, sadly, is no more. Really nice. It had a lot of customization to it. I had worked it out over the years. But again, it is no more. Also, my wife's Glock 42 also is no longer with us. Anyway, instead of it just being all sadness, I don't do this podcast primarily to help me. I do it to help you guys. So, in thinking about this, and I've been thinking about it for a while, in replacing it with a subcompact or micro compact 9mm. I did a whole episode on to micro 9 or not to micro 9. But I'm wondering if for me, and hopefully you guys glean from this too, right? I'm bringing you guys along on this journey to hopefully not just benefit me, but to benefit many people out there. Can I find anything to beat the Glock 26? And that might surprise you that I was such a fan of the Glock 26, because I'm not generally a fan of Glocks. They make a fine gun. They make a serviceable handgun. If your criteria for a good handgun is that it goes bang when you pull the trigger, Glock kind of sets a standard. If you've got that bar, if your bar is at that height, then they check that box. The Glock 26, though, I think was a sweet spot. I should say years and years ago, I also tried to replace it back when I was big into competition shooting. I've got the vast majority of my competition wins with a Smith & Wesson M&P. I think more than any other. I think I've won more competitions with a Smith & Wesson M&P than any other gun, period. And any other gun I've ever competed with, even going back to the rifle days. Right, so I really liked the Smith & Wesson M&P, and for a long time, I carried one on duty as a police officer. I carried one off duty sometimes. And I tried to go to the Smith & Wesson M&P Compact. And you would think that it was very similar, but it wasn't. It was just a little bit too big. It was big enough that I couldn't pocket carry it. I didn't generally like carrying it in the ways that I would carry the Glock 26. And if I was going to move up to belt carry, then I would just carry a full-size fighting handgun. So it was kind of this gun that it was a good gun, but it didn't work for me. I also don't like Appendix. I tried Appendix a couple of times. I don't like appendix for many reasons. I know many of the tactical operators out there like appendix. I don't like it for a lot of reasons, which is outside the scope of this, and I don't want to go into a deep, dark rabbit hole. But I don't carry that way, generally, or almost, unless I was demonstrating it, I almost never carry that way. I generally carry strong side hip, OWB. Whether it's a war belt, whether it's my daily EDC, full-size fighting handgun, which my best one of those is a SIG 226 Legion single action only, and another one that I often carry is my SIG M17, and both are equipped with a Trijicon RMR, the one that does not take batteries, that runs off ambient light and radioactivity. Anyway, there's a lot of cross-pollination there. I can switch from one to the other, very similar holsters. Could also just rock them on a war belt. Anyway, if I'm going to carry strong side belt, why wouldn't I just carry a full-size fighting handgun for me? There is situations, and often in the past, where I would carry just a little bit back, and I normally carry it around 3 o'clock, but I'll carry it a little bit farther back, maybe 4:30. So it goes a little bit behind the hip and carry inside the waistband, and that was a popular way that I would carry the Glock 26. Especially like in the summertime when I was just wearing a tank top or a t-shirt, if it was a situation like that. The Glock 26 was great. And then also, I wanted to go sans shirt, which I often like to do, especially when I'm out in the woods, in the wild, or on the beach or whatever. I can literally put the gun in my pocket. I have a chain much like the chain wallets of the 90s, which I'm glad those things are gone. But I had just a piece of 550 cord with a carabiner that clipped onto a belt loop, so that if the gun was in my pocket in that Kydex holster, when I draw it out of my pocket, the holster stays behind and the gun comes out. Very, very good system, and I could either carry it in the same holster inside the waistband at 4:30 or in the pocket, and that's the way that I carried for years. But again, alas, that gun is no more. So, what to do? Is there anything that rivals that can beat that? Now, I've already alluded to that I'm not the biggest fan of the Glock 43. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. Both the 26 and the 43 fire 9mm, right? That's not a newsflash to anybody, I hope. So, pretty much the same amount of force going out the front, but it's a much thinner grip, which you might think, oh, thinner is always better. But you have the same amount of force going into a thinner area. To me, when I first got the Glock 43 and tried to run it, I could not shoot it anywhere near as efficiently, let's say, as the Glock 26, because you have that same amount of recoil dispersed through a wider area. So it was a more, in my opinion, gentle, controllable, drivable gun. And the 43 takes its own proprietary magazines. One of the great things about the Glock, if you even want to say that, is that the magazines are cheap and affordable and attainable. And I already have a bunch of them because I ran a Glock for a long time as a police officer and as a private contractor. I have accumulated who knows how many Glock magazines. So that's a plus. But the 43, you just throw that out the window because it doesn't take the same magazines. And I also have a bunch of Glock spare parts. And many of the, not all, but many of the spare parts on the 43 are proprietary. So again, I'm not the biggest fan of Glock to begin with, so why would I even stick with Glock if I'm going to the 43? Why would I not go with like a Smith & Wesson M&P Shield or a Shield Plus, which is one that I'm seriously intrigued by. One that I'm also intrigued by is the EZ, and not because I can't rack a slide, but because unlike many of the other options, it is not a striker-fired gun. It is a hammer-fired gun, and especially after being broken in, and especially on the newer generations, like of, especially for sticking with the M&P line or the Shield line, a hammer fire in general has a potential to have a much, much better trigger pull than a striker fire. In general, there are exceptions. You can get an atrocious hammer fire trigger, and you can get a really, really good striker fire trigger like a 320 or a Walther PDP, and kind of negate that. But it's not just about weight, it's also about clean, crisp brakes. So there is the Shield Plus, which are striker fired, and they also have the EZ and the EZ Performance Center. And the EZ Performance Center, I believe, has a better trigger, better sights, things like that. So the EZ Performance Center, and I don't really care that much for this about capacity. Just carry a spare mag, and if I'm on my game that day, I can do a mag change in under a second. In most tactical situations, there's going to be a break when I'm moving from cover to cover or closing the gap or doing something where I can do a mag change. So despite what many politicians may think, banning high-capacity magazines really isn't going to do anything for practical rate of fire for anybody, for any serious shooter. But I digress. I'm not super concerned about capacity, so that's not a big criteria. I mean, I mentioned often one of my small carry guns is a 357 Magnum. It's often pocket carried. It weighs 11 point something ounces. It goes in my pocket, and it has 5 rounds. And I generally carry a speed strip that holds another 5 rounds. Right, so capacity is not, like, I wouldn't not go with a single stack. I wouldn't be like, oh, now that they have the Shield Plus, the Shield is obsolescent. I don't think that's true. All of the things being equal, maybe I'd go with the Shield Plus, mostly because it will have a slightly wider grip, which may help with recoil. I have experience with all these guns. I also have quite a bit of experience with the 365. And the 365 may be what I go with. And I think I mentioned this on guns that I want on an episode a long time ago, and I didn't. And this was back when I still had the Glock 26. And not really because I'm in love with the 365. And not because I'm a SIG fanboy. It might seem like that because I own a lot of SIG stuff, but they just make good stuff. And I like to teach. And I like to be able to be informed. And by far, I don't know if it is the most popular, but it is one of the most popular carry guns of our time. Again, I carry a full-size fighting handgun most of the time. I'm rocking one right now. Just took the dog out for a run, rocking a full-size fighting handgun. Went to the gym, full-size fighting handgun. You get the idea. But many people don't. Many people carry these very small guns like the 365. I would probably lean more towards the 365 XL. But mostly the 365, not even because I consider it the best, but because if I'm training and training people and I want to be well informed, it will be good to have that gun anyway because it is so common today as a carry gun. And I have quite a bit of experience, as you might imagine, with these guns, and they're okay. They're decent. It's probably the one to beat in the past several years. It is definitely the one to beat. So that or the Glock 26. It's got a lot going for it. A lot of people don't think of it this way, but it absolutely is a chassis gun, just like the 320 or the 250 before it, right? It's a chassis gun, meaning the fire control unit comes out, so I can change out the grip module, which I like because I might take a Dremel to it. And if I mess it up, then I can just buy another grip module and not destroy the whole gun. Or I can get a grip module that say a better fit for the way that I'm going to carry it or whatever, or the way that I shoot. So that's a big plus. I can also decide one day I want the regular size 365 and another day I want the 365 XL. And it's a chassis system. So that is a benefit. I don't think it's as big a benefit for the military as they wanted. I don't really see why they even wanted that. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. But for a concealed carrier or a private citizen where you can kind of pick and choose what you want or what your situation is for that time period, that epoch, right, that does make sense. So the 365 is definitely up there in the running. I'm fairly familiar with them. Again, they've been very common in the firearms training sales circles for a long time now. And so I'm fairly familiar with them, working on them. Now, I have seen them break. A lot of people would say they're just super reliable, but I've seen them break. I've seen them wear out. And by God's grace, I'm not the average shooter. This is not average shooter radio, right? This is gunfighter life. I like to train a lot. If you just want to go out and shoot, 50 rounds every 6 months and consider yourself well regulated, that's fine. But that's not me. I'm not even talking about the amount of rounds fired. I'm talking about dry fire and training and shoving it into stuff and things like that. I don't think it, just in my experience, I've seen them break, and I've seen Glocks break too, but I don't think it's as rugged a platform as a Glock. And I'm talking about a standard Glock, like a standard frame size Glock 19, Glock 26, Glock 17. So there is that. But again, it's still in the running. It's still one of the ones to beat. Again, it's not a primary. It wouldn't be my primary carry gun probably anyway. And then another thought occurred to me. Since I normally carry the M17, and I did a whole episode on that, a gun that I hate to love, I got it mostly to try out the military's new issued gun, and I really kind of fell in love with it. It's a fantastic gun. It really is. It really has won me over. I didn't want to like it, but I really do like it. Which got me thinking, what about the M18, the SIG M18, their compact version? Now, that's still a pretty big gun, and I don't really like the Glock 18 configuration as it stands. To me, it's kind of like the peanut butter Glock, the Glock 19X, the complete opposite of what I would want. It has a compact slide and a full-size grip. Again, I carry generally on the belt line. So the thing to conceal is the grip. Why do I want a giant grip and a short neutered slide? I can carry as long a slide as I want. And with the longer slide, I get longer sight radius, so more accuracy. I get, all other things being equal, generally more reliability because I have higher velocities. Not only is better ballistics performance downrange and better ballistics performance on hollow points because hollow points are velocity driven, so I get all the benefits there. I also get more purchase on being able to grab and manipulate the slide if I get a malfunction. For all those reasons, why do I want it's like the complete opposite of what I would want. When the 19X came out, I'm like, why? For a concealed carry context especially, yeah, you get more capacity, but come on. Talking to somebody that carries a full-size fighting handgun, it's the complete opposite configuration. Give me if I'm trying to conceal more, like why would I carry the 19X when I could just carry a Glock 17? Because the barrel and the slide is not what's hard for me to conceal if I'm carrying on my belt line. Why would I give up all those aforementioned benefits? Same with the M18. I don't really care about the M18 as it is configured, but if I wanted to turn it into a subcompact, what I could do is keep that compact size slide and cut. Again, it's a chassis system. I would do it even if it wasn't like on a Glock. I'd cut that sucker too if that's what I thought was best. But it's a chassis system, so I could take that grip module or buy an aftermarket one because I like the aftermarket ones better, like the Wilson Combat, and just cut it to be a subcompact and make a subcompact 320. I could get that very small concealable, easier to carry at 430, inside the waistband for the days when I would just be wearing a t-shirt or a tank top or whatever, and a pair of, cut off military uniform pants or whatever I'm rocking that day, and conceal it. And I've still got that M17, M18 chassis system, so I would have two. I'd have that redundancy because I already have the M17. It's a proven platform, right? Changing that shouldn't really affect anything. They make the subcompact 320, but with a much smaller barrel and slide. But so they already make the magazines. I think they're 10 rounds. So I could carry that in the gun, and it's concealable, and then in my pocket or on wherever I'm carrying my spare magazine, I could still carry a full size. I could even carry a 21 round magazine for my reload. And I already have not as many of those as I have Glock mags, but I have a lot of 320 mags. I've been rocking the M17 for a while. And I think the M18 comes with 3 magazines. So I could take the M18 and convert it from the opposite of what I want to what I would want. A slightly longer slide with a super subcompact grip, much like would be on the Glock 26. It's going to be about as wide as the Glock 26. It may be a little bit heavier. Again, I don't know because that gun doesn't exist unless you make it. I don't exactly know if I would like it as much as the Glock 26, but that's what I'm thinking. Also, its ability to mount optics. The M18 comes ready for an optic, which I don't think their subcompact version does. I like to rock an optic. It comes with an optics mounting system. Now, the Glock, I think the Glock MOS, I think they make a 26 version of it. However, in my opinion, in my experience from working and installing these professionally, many optics on handguns, the Glock MOS system is kind of an afterthought. I don't like it. If I really wanted to run a Glock with an optic seriously, I would lean you towards actually taking a regular Glock and having it cut out for a direct mount, RMR or Delta Point, whatever the optic that you wanted on there. I would have you get it and cut it directly. I think the SIG system, either the 365 or the M17, M18, is a better system than the Glock system. And I don't even think they're the best. But I think they're much better. That Glock MOS system kind of seems like a Me Too movement for we want to be able to do as little as possible and mount an optic on this Glock. There's not a lot of... It doesn't instill a lot of confidence in me as far as the mounting system for red dots on Glocks. I think the mounting system on many other systems is better. Now, I could just get a Glock 26 and have it direct cut. That wouldn't be a deal breaker for me. Just have it directly machined, and that would be even better than the SIG system, I think, because it's direct mounted, and I would get it drilled and tapped for the biggest, beefiest screws that I could have with that optic, not the little teeny tiny ones that come with a lot of the systems. But that is an intriguing option, having a M17 and taking a grip module and cutting it down, getting a subcompact grip on the M17. So it would essentially be like a 320 subcompact L. Also, it has the advantage of a manual safety. Now, I know that this runs contrary to many people, but I like a manual safety, especially on a carry gun. I'm not saying it's a go or no go, but for me, over my years and years of training, and you'd asked me this when I was indoctrinated on other systems a long time ago, I would have said no, stay away from safeties. But I actually now prefer them for many tactical reasons. I like a decent thumb safety. And that's probably its own episode. Not that I don't ever carry a gun without a safety. Again, I carry that 357 Magnum. And I have many guns without safeties. Manual safeties anyway. But I like that idea. Which way will I go? I don't know. This is just kind of, again, I'm taking you along on this quest. And hopefully it benefited more than just me. That's the reason I do the podcast. Now, there are many other guns in this arena, and this is not comparing all these subcompact and micro 9mm. There are many ones that are out there that I wouldn't even consider. This is a quest to see if I can beat the Glock 26, which is a good problem to have. The Glock 26 is a good subcompact carry gun. There are guns that I wouldn't even consider, like a Springfield Hellcat. Maybe it works, right? But if it did work, it would be the first Springfield handgun I've ever seen that I would consider reliable. And I don't like playing Russian roulette with my carry setup because it's a life-saving tool, right? I don't even like playing roulette. I don't like gambling with my gun money. Why would I spend money on a gun that maybe it'll be the one Springfield that I've ever seen handgun that actually works? Now, their M1As, they're decent, but the handguns, again, it will be the first one, and I'm not about rolling dice with the gun money. There are other ones that are decent guns, but just not for me that I've tried and gotten away from, like the Car. Car makes a fine super subcompact gun, but the thing with those is I think they're a little bit too small. If I'm going to go that small, why wouldn't I just carry my 357 Magnum? Again, there are many that are maybe just decent guns, but just for whatever reason, the way that I drive a gun, the way that I train, or just my experience or my personal preference, just aren't in the running for me. So these are some of the ones that I consider in the running. So if I left one out, it's just probably one that I'm just not considering for reason X that may or may not apply to you. So don't think that if I didn't mention it, that it's a bad gun. Anyway, I hope this journey, this little quest here, benefits more than just me. I hope you appreciate it. If you appreciate this content, because again, I do it pouring out my thoughts here and training and experience with you guys to benefit a broader audience. If you appreciate that, if you want to support the podcast, consider becoming a patron. Anyway, with that, let's roll into the tactical tip of the day and the tactical verse of the day. The Glock 26, like many Glocks, has that little gap between where the magazine goes, the magazine well on the back of the grip. There's a gap back there. And there's a reason for that gap. I think a lot of people get those little grip plugs in the back or whatever, not really running their gun hard or doing serious training, realizing why that gap is there. That gap is there so that if you get a wicked malfunction, like a really bad double feed and the round still caught in the magazine feed lips, you can reach your thumb back there because there's a little lip on the back of that magazine. You can really get a good purchase on that and rip that magazine out forcefully. Rip, reinsert. You can clear that malfunction, that double feed. That's why that cutout is back there. However, if you want to do that, going back to the Dremel, which I think any serious shooter should have, you can Dremel out, and I prefer this method, Dremel out a little bit on the sides of the weapon, if you so desire. Or easy fix, just use a slightly extended magazine, like a +1 base plate. Either that, or just cut out little grooves in the side of the magazine well, and you can grip it from the side with both the index finger and thumb of your support hand and rip it out. I prefer that method anyway. So if you do that, you negate the need for that cutout in the back. Well, contrary to popular belief, I think, Glocks can and do break. One of the things that break back there is a trigger spring. Also, one of the things that can break is the front sight, because you can drop it and break it, or smash it into something and break it. Back there, in that little cutout, now put it in a small bag or wrap it up in a piece of clear tape so that it doesn't slide into the working parts. But in that little back compartment, you can fit a spare trigger spring, a spare front sight, and maybe some other really small things if you so choose, but especially a spare front sight and a spare trigger spring. Right, you can fit those back in that compartment and then use one of those little grip plugs and keep it stowed in there so that you kind of have some extra line 1 gear if your gun breaks. So that's a tactical tip if you're rocking a Glock. Your tactical verse of the day, from the prophet Isaiah. And by his wounds we are healed. All of us like sheep have gone astray. Each one of us has turned to his own way. But the Lord has caused the wrongdoing of us all to fall on him. Are you ever just humbled and overwhelmed by the beauty and love that is our God? An almighty, all-powerful God, when we didn't deserve it, became a man and died for the ungodly. What does it say in Romans? While I was yet without strength, in due time Christ died for the ungodly. And let us not forget, this was written hundreds of years before Christ was, not before he existed, right? Read 1 John, he always existed. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. But before he was born of a virgin as a baby here on earth, this prophecy was written clearly, obviously, about Jesus. If you don't see Jesus in that, and that's just one small portion, read the entirety of Isaiah 53. Many other prophecies about Jesus in the Bible. It's clearly about Jesus. And if you don't think so, then it's just because your heart is hardened. But you can't objectively, I don't think, look at that and say that's not about Christ. And at least you think that is contrived or written after the fact or written after Christ. They found in the Dead Sea Scrolls in the 1940s a copy of Isaiah, word for word, I think, identical to what's in the canonical text, that predated it by like 1,000 years. It's not contrived. It is the literal word of God given to man, and it prophesies rightly Christ, a Savior, so good that for our sakes, though he was rich, yet for our sakes he became poor. Though he was exalted above every name, though he was in heaven, though he was all-powerful, he came down, born of a man, born in the flesh, and died for those who didn't deserve it. For you and for me, sinners. That's, again, are you ever just struck by the beauty and love that is our God? Anyway, with that, thanks for listening, and have a blessed day.